The meeting is now live.
Good evening, everyone. I think we're ready to kick off our meeting. So I'll start with roll call. This is Simone Tarver. Mary Fossey. Chris Garay.
Present.
Jim Langus.
Yes.
Ethel McNeil.
Here.
John Monroe.
Here.
Kari Kloss.
Here.
Simone Tarver. Here. Ben Young.
Present.
Julius Wilson.
Present.
Perfect. Our next item will be staff comments. I'll turn it over to Nicole.
So Flora is actually going to do some an update for everyone, and then I have some comments following her. So Flora, I yield my time to you.
Sure, Flora Diaz from Legal. Just a couple of brief comments about the public forums, since we are under the pandemic now, which is not part of the original plan, of course. And so under the city charter and the Open Public Meetings Act, we do still need to have a physical location for each of the public forums, one in each of the proposed districts, and then one that's citywide. However, we can still attend the forum remotely, possibly even the districting master, and I would encourage you to allow the public to attend remotely and to submit written comments or to telephone in to submit comments at the public forum in order to make sure that people who don't feel safe attending in person can still participate and don't feel like they're being left out at all. And then it would be easier to maintain social distancing. Of course, we're a few months out from actually having the public forums, but I can't gauge any more than anybody else can what situation Washington State's going to be in, or even what phase of the governor's reopening plan we're going to be in at that point. So just under the regular OPMA RCW, we are allowed to have remote attendance at these meetings as long as there is still a spot where the public can go and hear what's going on and participate physically. And then I guess the extra thing that I would encourage and advise you to do is to allow them to participate with submitting written comments and possibly telephoning in as a sort of low-tech way to participate for people who don't have good computer access.
And so can everyone see my document that I'm sharing right now? This is Nicole Weber.
Yes.
So this is something that I provided to you very early on, and I think I'll make some updates to it because we will need to meet in July. And, it says regular meetings in April, May, and June. That'll actually be probably we'll need to have 2 meetings a month, depending on how quickly and well we can get through information. But I expect that, and I think even if we go back to being able to meet in person, we could do 1 meeting in person and 1 meeting remote, just to try to help people with the time commitment. We do have to have our plan complete and packaged and handed to City Council by November 1st. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that deadline. And so really we're shooting for October to be through all 6 of those meetings, have all of our final revisions, and then a publication of what our final map will look like. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that and put that up on the screen and yeah, get that in your vision before we started today's meeting. So if there's no more, if there's no questions from the commission, then we can move on with our presentation from Tony Fairfax.
Alrighty, if there's no questions, Tony, I'll turn it over to you for item number 1.
Excellent. First, let me say I hope everyone is doing well and safe and sound. Before we begin to get into the initial plans, I wanted to go over a couple of analysis that I've done over this last month since the last meeting. And the two analysis hopefully will address two questions that came out of the last meeting. I try or an attempt to address each of the questions in the next meeting. And the first one had to do with the turnout in Delta. And so I looked at the turnout in Delta for two elections for the combined district plans versus the separated plans. And the second one had to do with compactness. There was a question really centering on why this district that I thought was more compact actually ended up being less compact numerically. And before I begin, let me apologize. There's a second set of slides and PDF files that I've created that address there's a couple of typos and an image that's changed. They're changed on this presentation, but you may not have access to those yet. And so let me apologize. Last month was very hectic, and I was only able to actually go through them in detail this weekend. So I apologize. I understand how ink is and how expensive that is, and so I apologize. And so let's now look at the first question. And so in essence, I obtained data from the county and looked at the precincts that were contained within the neighborhoods, specifically the Delta neighborhood, and then all of the remaining areas in the district. So for example, in Delta, if you can see my pointer, had registered voters at 2607 in those precincts, and then the votes for 2019 was 847 in those precincts, yielding a 32.5% turnout. The remaining portions of that district, and I'm talking about the separated plan right now, at 8767 and 3556, giving us a 40.6% difference. The two combined gives us 38.7% turnout for that particular district. The combined Delta, of course, remained the same, 32.5. However, the remaining district actually had 8557 and 3913, or a 45.7% turnout. And so there was a 40.6 to 45.7% increase, or difference rather, and a 5% approximately increase in the turnout percentage. As far as actual votes are concerned, we're talking 357 vote difference between the separated plan, this 3556 and 39113, or you could look at the 4403 and 4760, difference in the votes. So there was an increase of 357 total votes that occurred in the combined plan versus the separated plan. Now remember, what we're trying to do is just get an idea of the turnout in an example plan or sample plan where we separated Delta from Northwest Everett. And so this just gives us an idea of the difference in votes. Another way of looking at this, and by the way, we don't know the breakout for a particular candidate. So if there was a candidate of choice of some type, clearly that candidate would obtain some portion of that 357 votes. How much? We don't know. We could probably approximate it with the more detailed analysis, but 357 would be the max. But as I was saying, another way to look at it is, what if we actually adjusted or ran a GOTV effort in Delta and increased the turnout to the remaining portion of the district? So we increased that 32 to 40.6. Well, that would be an increase of 211 votes. If we did the same thing for the combined, it would increase up to 344. And so looking at a GOTV effort, we'd have a difference of 130 votes, really difference. And once again, we do not know the breakout of which candidate of choice would get what. So that's 2019. If we look at 2018, 2019 was a pure off-year election, an off, if you will. 2018 was an off-year election, but you have a congressional election that year, so you're going to get an increase in turnout, and that's exactly what you get. But first, let me let you see that the increase in turnout percentage is very, very close to each other for each of the district and each of the plans. It's surprisingly the same. And so, for example, Delta goes from 32.5 to 58.6, a 26% increase. If you look at that remaining District 2, it goes from 40.6 to 66.5, another 26%. And if you go look at the District 1, the remaining portion goes from 45 to 71, another 26. So there's virtually no difference between the increase that occurs in that off election to the increase that occurs in the congressional district election. But if you look at 2018, we have, very similar to 2019, we have 328 votes increase from the separated plan to the combined plan. Once again, we do not know how these will fall out with candidates. The last one was 2019 was 357, so very similar. And if we adjust those, meaning that we adjust the 66, adjust delta, do a GOTV and increase it to 66.5, you get 206 votes increase. Adjust that to 71.2, may be difficult to do, but you get 336 votes. And the difference between those two ends up being 130 votes. Once again, very similar to what occurred in 2019 for their off election year. And so the only last thing, which I didn't put on the slide, was the difference between the minority percentage using 2010 data was also very slight. The difference ended up being 26% for the separated plan, or excuse me, for the combined plan, and 26.9% minority for the separated plan. So it really wasn't that much difference between the separated plan and the combined plan. Do I have any questions?
This is Kari from Northwest. I thank you for explaining that. I'd read it and I was trying to get to what you were getting to. So I appreciate the numbers and I appreciate seeing that they're very close election to election, and it doesn't differ that much if we combine them versus separate the two. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I will move now to the next question or address the next issue that we had, and that was in compactness. Looking at that combined district looked like it was more compact than the separated plan, and here's the reason why. We may use this as time goes on. When I created the presentation, I eliminated the water, and if you can recall, last month I talked about it. I think it has something to do with water, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. Well, I eliminated the water just for presentation sake. And in reality, this area in the black was the actual district that was analyzed in compactness. So you can see that that includes all of the water blocks. And in the separated plan, once again, did the same thing, eliminated all the water. But this was the district that was included in the separated plan as that District 1. And so when you look at it side by side, you can clearly see why, in essence, this area for land looks like it's more compact. It looks much closer to a circle than this. But in reality, when you're actually analyzing it with the water blocks, what we end up with, and you can probably see this now, that this actually, the separated plan, looks more compact, closer to a circle. Remember, we compare these to a circle or a square or what's called a convex hull. This looks more circular than this right here. And this is the reason why this district was actually ended up less numerically compact than the other. And so the lessons learned one out of this is that our final plans, we may want to remove the water and see how it looks, or we may want to actually include, we may want to do both. So we'll may take a look at both configurations. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. Excellent. Let me now try to change screens. To the initial plans.
Before you get started on that, I just wanted to speak really quickly to the plan for this presentation that Tony's about to go through. So this is going to be very long. There's going to be a lot of information. And so this is why I'm asking the commission to hold an additional meeting this month so that we can go over the presentation tonight, which will probably take about an hour or so. Maybe there's time for some clarifying questions throughout if you have them. And then we hold another meeting either next Monday or at a different time where we can ask questions and really dive into this presentation. Following that, once you get all your questions answered, we'd like to send you a link so you can fill out a form online, which will allow you to say what you like and what you don't like about each of the options. And then Tony will take that feedback, improve the maps, come back to you with new maps, and hopefully in between the time that you provide comment to him and the time that we have our next meeting, we can put that up for the community if you guys vote to do that. And then we can include the community's written comment in your packets for conversation in June. And I know that that's probably very confusing, so we can talk more about it real quickly before Tony starts his next presentation if anyone has questions or objections or anything like that.
I think that's a good idea. It's Julius.
This is Simone. Yeah, I agree, Nicole. I think that's a good way for us to move forward. I think that after we've had a chance to hear this presentation and have a little bit of time to think about how we feel about each of the different plans, I think at that point would be a good time to have some community feedback, just as we're starting that, thinking process. And if no one else has, go ahead.
Oh, this is Kari. I was just going to say, I've blocked out the first 2 Mondays of my months for this. If that's the direction we decide to go, it works for me.
Yeah, I think in the email Nicole had mentioned maybe next Monday, and that would work fine for me as well. We can vote on that probably toward the end of the meeting, unless we want to do the vote like right now. We'll do it at the end. So if anyone else has any other comments, if not, Tony, do you want to start your presentation?
Sure.
Okay.
And so first, let me say that these are draft plans, and of course, they represent the beginnings of conceptual district for the city. And they're not necessarily final plans, although they could be final plans. We could find a final plan in this ultimately. But they represent the general location of different districts throughout the city, and I'll explain what I mean. But before we begin, let me just tell you or give you an idea of the plan designation sometimes that I use. And usually it's a letter and a number. And so I'll go from A1 to A2 to A3. Well, these have some common scheme associated with them. So the A scheme will be, for example, A1 or A2 will be similar to A1, maybe with some slight changes under some general scheme. And then A3 may be similar to A2 or A1. But when a difference is interjected, then I move to another letter. So the B1 represents sort of a different mindset, if you will.
Hey, Tony, if you're pulling up you have to reshare your screen with the new presentation because we're still on the old one. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at it. Let me see. Let me stop sharing, and then let me reshare. I apologize for that. Okay, does everyone see this now?
Hey, Nicole, I'm not able to see it. Can you check to see what's wrong there? I'm in the meeting, but I'm not able to see.
So we're on the first slide titled Initial District Plans, Draft District Plans A1, A2, A3, and B1. That's the slide that we're on right now.
Okay, but I'm on my screen of my computer. It just said someone in the meeting should let you in soon. It just went to that.
Let me see here. I don't show you in the lobby. Okay, Tony, why don't you keep going? Ethel, I'm gonna call you outside the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. And so, not to reiterate what I said in the last 2-3 minutes, these are plans that actually represent the beginning of conceptual districts. And the scheme designated letter and number represents sort of a common scheme or configuration for the plans under that letter. And so when I change the B, it's sort of a different mindset. And so next, the development strategy of this phase, moves from a macro point of view to a more detailed. So first, what we did was we proposed the core areas of the city. So we have the core areas of the city. But then we're now going to begin to actually add different areas around those core areas. And they'll be added in maybe different directions and different aspects. So these, again, will be generalized, not necessarily detailed in the final. Then, hopefully, what we can do is pick 2 or 3 of these general areas and then go into a more detailed, and that's the precinct level. So then we'll look at maybe adding or subtracting precincts. So we'll move from most likely not splitting these neighborhoods to potentially splitting these neighborhoods because we desire to actually get a little more detailed. And we'll just have to see how that works out. And then finally, once we get to those 3, say 2 or 3 different detailed, those will become sort of our final plans that we either will massage or will select for the final plan. So that's what you should expect over the next, I guess, couple of months or so. The first plan is Plan A1. And that happens to be the combined plan. And so this is going to be somewhat of the baseline for the Plan A series, if you will. And so just to go through, this is the configuration of District 1. And I'll probably go back and forth to these different maps, if you will, just to let you know. But the District 1 is a northern-based district, and it has the neighborhoods of Northwest Everett, Delta, Bayside, Riverside, and Port Gardner. And the core area choice, we said Northwest Everett, and we had a discussion of Delta. And so we may or may not pick one or the other. That's left up to you all to actually make the particular, excuse me, dismiss that. My reminder popped up. Whether we pick Northwest Everett as that core or Delta. The largest populated neighborhood is Delta, and so that's interesting. 2 of the neighborhoods, Northwest Everett and Delta, are wholly contained. So you can see that Northwest Everett and Delta are wholly contained. Riverside is almost wholly contained except for this portion. And the reason for that is, or the reason for it are these irregularly shaped precincts that exist that slice through neighborhoods throughout the city. And so I'm going to show you that next time. I didn't want to inundate you this time, but next time, as we become more detailed, I'm going to show you how these precincts actually slice through neighborhoods. And henceforth, it's virtually impossible to have whole neighborhoods for all of these districts, even if we tried. Bayside remains split, of course, with that northern and eastern area. And this district includes a diverse population within Delta, as we've talked about before, and a third of the person speaking another language in there. And the district is characterized by being the location of the city's colleges and older housing structures, excluding that Delta neighborhood. Remember, we found there's a high percentage of renters that most likely gave it a percentage, a newer a median housing structure amount. And so next, we're going to look at District 2. And again, I don't know whether to stop at each plan or we'll stop at the end and then we can discuss. Maybe I'll stop at the end of each plan and talk about if there are, or ask if there are any questions pertaining to that particular plan. Next is that plan, District 2 rather, and it encompasses the central eastern portion of the central city rather. And so it goes from downtown area down here up in Bayside all the way down to Valley View in a diagonal fashion. It encompasses Bayside, Glacier View, Lowell, Pinehurst, Beverly Park, Port Gardner, South Forest Park, Valley View, and View Ridge, Madison. The core area for the district is Lowell that we selected. We discussed the downtown, but I think we picked Lowell. It extends again from the downtown area all the way down to Valley View. The largest populated neighborhood is Port Gardner here. So it has the overwhelming aspect population of that neighborhood inside, whereas the smaller pieces inside District 1. And there are three neighborhoods, Glacier View, Lowell, and Valley View, that are wholly contained. This right here, South Park, isn't wholly contained, once again, because of this irregular shaped precinct. So that precinct crosses over both South Forest Park and View Ridge, Madison. So it's either one or the other. It has to be in one neighborhood or the other. And the district also includes very similar median household age that centers around the low 1960 areas throughout here. Next is the District 3. And so District 3 encompasses a portion of western and the coastal area cities. And so this is on that west coast side, and these three, Boulevard Bluff, Harbor View, Seahurst, Glen Haven, and View Ridge, Madison, were selected as the core areas. Blue Ridge, Bluff, Evergreen, Harbor View, Seahurst, Glen Haven, Pinehurst, Beverly Park, South Forest Park, and View Ridge Mountains consist of this area. Remember, this area right here is contained because of that split precinct, or precinct that splits neighborhoods. And there's a little piece right here for Pinehurst, Beverly Park. I've got to get the names down here. Four neighborhoods, Boulevard Bluff, Evergreen, Harbor View, Seahurst, Glen Haven, and View Ridge, Madison, are wholly contained within inside the district. Pinehurst, Beverly Park is split by three districts, just as a notation. So this was noted before, and you'll see in A2 that changes. And this district is characterized by its coastal western boundaries, as well as it has newer housing structures and a higher than average household incomes in this particular area compared to the other ones in the city. The next district is District 4, and District 4 encompasses the southwest portion of the city, down at the bottom of the city. It's got Cascade View, Holly, Twin Creeks, and Westmont. The core area is the Casino Road area, the majority of it. Casino Road actually extends past it, but this contains the bulk of Casino Road inside Westmont. Two of the neighborhoods, Westmont and Holly, actually that is a mistake because Westmont is actually not wholly contained. There's a sliver right here that, once again, a precinct that splits it. So that's another change that I need to make. So really, only Holly is wholly contained. And the reason why uh, this splits it is once again an irregularly shaped precinct that curves out here, and we can look at those when we go into detailed next month and looking at precincts that may cause problems. But the district is characterized by its diverse population, its higher than average percentage that speaks another language in addition to English, and higher renter percentage, and uh, higher renter percentage that's higher than the majority of the neighborhoods. The district also contains the only majority minority neighborhood looking at the ESRI enrichment data for neighborhoods in the city. Another point, if you look at an area in the city that was the potential of cracking, which we have in our criteria, not to do, it would be this area. It would be the southern area, and specifically, it would be this area. And as a matter of fact, if you look at Westmont and Holly, Westmont being having the majority, the highest majority minority percentage, Holly having the second highest majority minority area, they actually fit like a puzzle. They almost like fit together. And so this is the area that I would say that the city has to be careful in actually cracking and breaking this up. Consequently, you'll see that in each of the plans, this was left the same. This is left alone. And doesn't mean that we can't change it, but this is the one that we have. I think we have to actually be careful at doing something like that. Next comes District 5, and District 5 has the southeastern portion of the city, where District 4 had the southwestern portion of the city. And it encompasses Cascade View, Pinehurst, Beverly Park, Silver Lake, Twin Creeks, Westmont, a small sliver, as I mentioned here, just a little small sliver because of that precinct that exists right here that interjects to the west. And so the core area was the Silver Lake neighborhood. The largest populated neighborhood in here is Silver Lake. One of the neighborhoods, Silver Lake, is wholly contained. All the other ones are actually split. And District 5 crosses over the Boeing Freeway and adds precincts. So whereas District 4, I did not include it on the presentation, it doesn't cross over the Boeing Freeway, whereas District 5 must cross over to add population to get it within that deviation or to fall below the deviation. And the district is characterized by, once again, it has a fairly diverse population, has newer housing structures, and it's a high percentage that speak another language compared to the other areas of the city. And so that's some of the aspects of it. So that, let me go back. So that's Plan A. Are there any questions pertaining to Plan A and, I don't know, reasons why or anything? And I'm not looking for, necessarily this precinct versus that precinct, but just generalized questions if you want to ask any.
This is Simone. I had one general question. So on these maps, anytime that there's like a small portion of another existing neighborhood like separated, is that typically, it looks like those are just like maybe one precinct or a couple precincts that we're pushing over there. Like for example, like there we're showing Cascade View. That other piece of Cascade View, is that one big precinct, the like little purple triangle right by that 2%? Yeah, so that's just one big precinct, or are some of them a few precincts that are being split off?
It's only, I believe, 2 precincts that exist here. I believe it's 2 or 3. And let me see if I can. Yeah, it's only right in here. It's only 2, maybe 3 precincts. When I added Westmont and Holly together, it comes to probably about 17,000. And so, in order to get it up to that -5%, it needed maybe another 1,700 or 1,800 to get it to that 19,000 or something was the low end. So I think it was only 1 or 2 precincts that needed to be added to this. And I can go and I can look specifically if you want, because I have the Maptitude program up and I can bring it up to answer that. But I believe it's only 1 or 2. The problem is one, that they're really irregular shape.
Yeah.
And they actually, some will cross over the Holly and Cascade, or cross over the Twin Creeks to Holly. And so the precincts, as I'll point out next month, they actually split neighborhoods. And so it's virtually impossible to get all of the neighborhoods, as I said before, wholly contained within the districts. We're going to split neighborhoods just because of the precincts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I'll move to Plan A2. And now Plan A2 really just modifies Plan A simply, and it tries really to, I guess, correct some of the issues that Plan A1 has, and I'll let you know what they are. And so I combined the districts in order to save paper, let's say, and not use up have a 60-page slide. So we'll combine districts 1 and 2 on one slide. And so this shows you districts 1 and 2 on the same slide. And so District 1 in A2 modifies the plan by adding the downtown area, Bayside. So before, remember, it came up here for Plan A1. Well, the downtown area in Bayside is now added to District 1 now. Unfortunately, once again, because of precincts, again, there's that precinct that splits Bayside and Port Gardner. This could not be added without adding a great deal of precinct down in this area. And again, I'll try to point that out just to show you the limitations that we have in the plan. So there remains that portion of Bayside still split inside District 1. And in District 2, of course, the Bayside, or rather the downtown area, is removed. And Port Gardner now is wholly contained within District 2. And Riverside actually changes a slight. It's not that much difference. It actually changes this area over here, but it's not that much difference. Now, the big change, if there is a big change, is that Pinehurst Beverly Hill Park is modified so it only splits only splits 2 different districts. Before, it actually split 3 times, and the commissioner mentioned that last time. And so one of the repairs was, let's try to split that less. So we have this now split between 2 and split between 5 that exists down here. So we actually improved the plan by splitting it less than 3 times. And so other than that, the district configuration didn't really change that much insofar as any of the demographic and socioeconomic aspects pertain to it. One of the things that I will do is I haven't run the enrichment program, enrichment data program by Esri until we get down to somewhat of the final districts. And so then I'll run it and we'll be able to see what all of the socioeconomic variables are for each of the districts. But right now we're just getting generalized areas to look at whether we want to change here and there. The next districts 3, 4, and 5 also changed slightly, if you will. District 3 only removes that portion of Pinehurst Beverly Park. Remember, there was that interjection in here. So that's removed. And so now we have the core districts: Boulevard Bluff, Harborview, Seahurst, Glen Haven, View Ridge, Madison, and Evergreen. That's wholly contained. And now we have that sliver once again that's in South Forest Park. And so that's the only change. Once again, just slight. District 4, there was no change. Once again, I said that I made no change for District 4 throughout. And District 5, only that Pinehurst Beverly Park changed up here. So in essence, this corrected some of the problems that associated with A2. Was there, or A1? Was there a question? Thought I heard someone mention it. All right. We're ready to move to.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you look at this map of A2, 3, 4, and 5, I want to make sure I'm seeing this right. Cascade View and Twin Creek would be District 5 with Silver Lake?
Yes. Except for this area.
A little small portion right down there that would end up still being over in District 4.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, there were just really two different ways to add population to this Westmont Holly area. There could be precincts added up here, a couple of irregular precincts, and then the Silver Lake district would have to encompass this, but this would most likely split Holly, and this would make this, it would be indented, and so the Silver Lake district would have to come over here in an irregular shape. Now, we could do something like that, but it just didn't seem logical for me to actually do that under the circumstances.
I'm okay with this.
Okay, excellent. So now let's go to A3, and once again, A3 modifies from A2, if you will. And so what we have, in essence, for A2, District 1 and 2, we don't have a dramatic change. Oops, here we go. We have Riverside being modified. If you remember, Riverside came down here a little bit. All this is added population, a little population to Riverside. And District 2 removed South Forest Park area right here. So remember, we had only a sliver down here. And now what we've done is we've added a little more, since we had a sliver, since it was split. Well, this actually modifies it to split a little more, if you will, right down the middle. We were splitting it anyway. And so there's not that much difference between the modifications of A1 and A2 for, or A2 and A3 for District 1 and 2, except for those two. Now for 3, 4, and 5, once again, we're doing some minor changes. This adds that South Forest Park area, because we actually went from that little sliver down to half or close to half of the district. We then did no changes to 4. We kept that the same. And then no changes from A2. And so really the only changes were up in this area of District 1, 2, and 3. Not that much changes, not that many changes. And finally, we're looking at Plan B1. And once again, as I mentioned before, this is sort of a new concept of a plan. And so the concept of this plan is, what would a west Western Coastal District look like, where you obtain pretty much all of the West Coast neighborhoods, if you will. So that was sort of the objective. And so all of this Boulevard Bluff, Harbor View, Seahurst, Glen Haven, View Ridge, Madison, even the Port Gardner, and then Bayside, the bulk of the downtown area, all included in this district. And because of that, you can see that it does change the district somewhat, or the other district somewhat. And so now, this is similar to the beginning, only a small portion of Bayside exists up at the top, really, up for District 1. The Northwest, Everett, Delta, and Riversides are wholly contained within the districts now. We can do that, these three districts right here. Part of Port Gardner is contained within the district, however, it is split now 3 times, which is at a deficit to the plan. District 2 now becomes, moves down a little south of the plan, but it extends to the west. And so you can see that now South Forest Park, Glacier View, Lowell, Valley View, and Evergreen are wholly contained. However, because this District 3 extends up here, it has to lose population down here. And so if we are affixing District 4, which we did, then the only district really is District 2 to pick up that population right here. If we actually grab population with District 5, then in essence, really, we'd have to try to drop this, and the precincts just are not compatible to do so without having a little sliver that connects these together. We could drop this, but we'd have to have a little sliver of land to connect these two. So it's the only logical way, really, I'll say, is to connect District 2 to this area that has to be dropped, because this extends now northern and includes the downtown area. So this is much less compact. You can see visually so that it is less compact. Let me move down to District 3 and 4. So we see that District 3 is the focal point, and I've already gone over what that occurs. That's the Western District here. And so we have that wholly contained Boulevard Bluffs, Harvard View, Seahurst, Glen Haven, View Ridge, Madison, and then Bayside downtown, and then Port Gardner area. District 4 has no change. And then District 5, there is some portion that is removed from the north end area of the district for 5. Finally, just some thoughts about the district. Plan A and Plan A2 and A3 corrects the potential issues, and that is that the A1 actually split the Beverly Pinehurst Beverly Park 3 ways. A2 and A3 corrects that. It also removes the downtown area. I'm not saying it should. There was a question of whether the downtown area in the last meeting should be included in that Lowell district. So it does remove that, just if that is some desirable aspect to the commission. A2 is the most compact plan using the mean, not counting the districts. I'll save that for potentially the end to actually count each district and determine that out of our final group. Plan A2, A3, and B1, this is one of the changes in the version 2 slides, is splits the least, which is 7. So really A1 splits 8, these split 7 districts. Plan B1 is that coastal district. However, there really is, it can only be accomplished by the District 2 moving westward and encompassing that area that District 3 must lose. Or potentially you could have District 4 cross over the Boeing Highway and grab that population, which uh, most likely isn't the best way to do it. And then District 4 remains the same, and it's the only place that I see in the city, that southern area, that potential cracking can occur. So dividing up Westmont and Holly is most likely not a good thing to do. And so those are the plans that I lay on the table right now. I guess what we're looking for now are potential comments, potential other suggestions, and of course you're going to fill out the form. Different ways of configuring. I can come back to you with maybe I should move westward this way or eastward that way or southern or some aspect like that.
I have a question having to do with the deviation percentage.
Yeah.
And what is an acceptable deviation percentage when it comes to population between districts? With populations being one of the basic guidelines under the law, it seems like we should try and have populations as close in the 5 districts as possible to one another. I also know that we need to, or believe we need to keep our districts as compact as possible. If you, when I looked at the material you sent us on Friday, when we look at A2, for example, there's a deviation in population, percentage population. A2, Mr. Fairfax, if you can bring it up.
Oh, I forgot. I have to reshare it just a second when I change application.
It shows it.
Can everyone see it now?
No, we see you.
You're sharing districting statistics.
Yes.
Yep, that's where we're at.
Okay, good. So this is A2. Please continue, Commissioner.
Can you go to the map of District 2 that you provided? You call it, yeah. It has the we have, if this is District 2, we have, is this the same document that we had Friday, or is this one that we received it at 4 o'clock this afternoon?
This, I think this one should be the same. I think A3 right here changed. A3 changed from splitting this, but A2 should be the same.
Okay, let's go back to A2 then. It shows the deviation between districts 3 and 5, a difference of 1,700 population.
Right there. Yeah.
And then before, apparently you changed A3 because A3, until we received a new one today, and which we may not have had a chance to look at because we didn't receive it until the afternoon. But A3 showed a differentiation of 2,300 votes before apparently you adjusted it over the weekend. So my question is still with respect to deviation percentages, how close do we want to get our populations to one another to try and align with the basic rules under the law to have populations equal, and there's other factors as well. But let's talk about populations and deviation percentage now.
Right. Well, the courts have ruled that from the lowest to the highest percent has to be 10%. And however, most map drawers and many jurisdictions will use a plus or minus 5% as the deviation. So when you're drawing, you want the district to not be greater than 5% or less than minus 5%. And so that's what you're shooting for. So anything in between, unless there's something going on that's nefarious, is acceptable. And when I say nefarious, means that sometimes there's an intentional aspect to give lower deviations for some particular reason. But we're not we're not doing any of that. And so with our constraint that we have, let's say, of using precincts, it's understandable that we're not going to get everything close to zero deviation.
Well, this is a question then for the rest of the committee is because we're looking at 19 to 20 plus thousand voters, and at times we have low turnouts. Do we really want to have a deviation of up to 5%, which is pretty significant in terms of the number of voters? Or should we try and work towards getting that to as low of a separation or an alignment of the same and as close with all of the districts as we can? It's really a matter of what the committee would choose, whether it's the being comfortable with having one particular district having 1,000 or 700 or 1,400 more votes than another, or one where there's perhaps 3, 4, 500 that are set that are more or less than the other. I think it's something that the committee should talk about, and I just wanted to ask your thoughts on that because I noticed a couple of areas that really drew my attention. Thank you.
And thank you for your question. And in the beginning, when I went through sort of a redistricting 101, at the end of the traditional redistricting criteria section, I talked about trade-offs. And when you're drawing plans, there's always trade-offs. So we could actually equalize the districts a little better by actually moving precincts. Well, the trade-off of equalizing the population may be splitting of neighborhoods. And so, again, it's up to the commission what to put a criteria on. So if the splitting of neighborhoods is relaxed, we could probably equalize this -4 and this 4.20 percentage and get that down. But we may split Evergreen potentially. Or we may have to add to Evergreen and then we split some other area. So there are always trade-offs, and the trade-offs are, what do you put, your credence in? What do you put your priorities in on? And so right now, this first model looks at trying to achieve whole neighborhoods as much as possible, but in our detailed section, as we begin to select, that's a question that we need to answer. Is should we move this precinct over and split that neighborhood? Does it really matter? Where do we put our criteria on it? The courts say it's acceptable to have -5 plus 5, but the city may not want that, and so that'll be something that you all can address when we get down to that detailed level. Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Julius.
Yes.
That on District 1 in the water, there's that chunk of land. Is that a part of Everett?
Yes.
Okay.
Right up here. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you add to see the percentage, or I didn't read anything about that. I haven't came across any information about that from you. Did you do anything on that?
No. That was already included in the population. What wasn't included, as I was, I guess, alluding to last time, was the water. And so that water area for the last time was what was actually giving us giving us a different reading than the appearance of the district. And so where I created that map, it always included this land area right here for that island.
Okay.
What it didn't include was the water area. And so when you ran the analysis for the compactness, it included the water area, but the appearance of the district seemed like it was more compact than it actually was. So that land was always included in there. But
And
the water
Julius,
was.
to further answer your question, that's Jetty Island. Nobody lives there. It's a sand barge kind of or block thing for the port.
Okay.
And I mean, it's a really fun place to visit, but nobody lives there.
Oh, very good. Very good.
That's all.
Okay. And so it does take some time to digest this. But as Ms. Weber was saying, the comments of which districts or which plans do you favor, which plans do you not favor, and potentially, where should we investigate shifting or moving the districts in different configurations. And so that's, I think, the next phase that we want to look at is one, which ones out of these are favorable, and two, can we actually, shift, for example, District 1 down further to the east or so, or can we actually take out Everett and move that South Forest Park, or take more Port Gardner? Questions like that or suggestions like that, and we can begin to look at that the next time. And then once we actually look at those plans, we need to select sort of the generalized plans that we want to focus on. And then we'll move down to that detailed question of the commissioner of, well, should we actually equalize this 4% a little better, or that minus 4% and that 4.20% by shifting a precinct over, and then what precinct or which neighborhood should we do that in?
And
so
this is Flora from legal, and since the district member did mention some of the criteria, I'd just like to review all of it really quickly with everyone. So that each district should be as compact as possible, consist of geographically contiguous area. The population data may not be used for purposes of favoring or disfavoring any racial group or political party. And to the extent feasible, and if not inconsistent with the basic enabling legislation of the city, the district boundaries shall coincide with existing recognized natural boundaries and shall, to the extent possible, preserve existing communities of related and mutual interest. And that's where the trade-off that Mr. Fairfax was talking about comes in, that you do get to take into account whether or not to split neighborhoods more, if that's what you think of as the communities of mutual interest.
I'd like to just add that, where it says as compact as possible, it refers to shape, not size. And a regular shape like a star or a snake would not be considered compact under state law. And your graphic this evening separating District 1 is an example of an option that impacts other potential districts and potentially changes their compactness. Just look at what was B1, and that really was really created several issues in terms of alignments. And it's clear that separating District 1 creates an irregular shape. And I bring that up because you'd mentioned it earlier, and I just wanted to add to what the attorney just shared in terms of some of the what basic rules under state law. Irregular shapes like a star or just aren't part of what we're supposed to be looking at. Well, I don't say that. We look at it, but it may not be part of what what is the best approach.
Yes, and I clearly, let me just say that first say that this is you, the commission's plan, and as surrogates of the city, and not Tony's plan. And so one of the things I try to do is not to give my opinion of what I think as far as a plan that should be configured. I'm trying to stand out of it and pull out of you all what the plan is. But since you brought it up, this clearly would not be the district configuration that I would select. I mean, this was done to show what it would, what the entire plan would look like to a certain extent if we tried to actually create a coastal district. If we did create a coastal district, most likely we would have to grab this area right here, which would make this not contiguous, not compact, if we decided to leave Westmont and Holly where it is. And so it's almost developed as a lesson of the ramifications that would occur if we went in a certain direction. And not necessarily, I would think this would be a good plan. Sometimes you do plan configurations just to see the ramifications or implications of what it would do with other districts. This is in that vein of seeing what it would do. There's a domino effect many times that occurs when you have a certain configuration.
Tony, question for you. This is Chris Garay.
Yes.
Do you think it would be feasible, without getting too busy or complex, to overlay the voting precincts on these different plans?
Yes. And I think that is the next level that I was going to move to, but I wanted to wait to get to see generalized ideas of sort of generalized district and configurations. The next level is to go down to the precinct level, so you will be able to actually see. And some of these, you're right, it will be busy in some areas, and in other areas it will not. But the next level that we're going to go to, I think, will be the detail level where we actually will be moving precincts potentially. And so our next level, yes. And I want to do that specifically in certain areas just to show you the issues that we have with the overlapping of neighborhoods. So the answer to your question, yes, it will be a little busy in some areas, but I think it'll be useful for our next level that we're going to move to.
Great, thank you. That'd be pretty helpful, I think.
Yes, yes. And the other thing is we're going to move to a level to where eventually you'll see the GIS system and I'll be able to interact with you all on the spot to look at how or the impact of things. Right now, I essentially develop it and try to create these PDFs and slides and show it to you. But as we move from that macro to detailed, we will get to the point where I'll work the GIS system, the Maptitude system, and you'll say, well, what happens if we add that precinct to this? Or what happens if we remove that precinct? And so that'll be the next level. But that's not a good idea to start like that. It's a good idea, in my opinion, to go from a generalized to a more detailed approach. So we're not just removing and adding precincts here and there. We're doing it in somewhat of a logical and methodical approach. Any other questions on the plans or our approach? Okay. Ms. Weber?
So I guess my first question is, do you all need time to marinate and look over these plans and come back and ask more questions? If the answer to that is yes, then we should start by scheduling a meeting, a follow-up meeting for this month. If the answer to that is no, then I will create an online form for you all to fill out to provide written comment to Tony and I so that he can bring you some improved options at our next meeting, which will be in June. Um, and then the next part of what we need to do today is decide if we want to open that form up for the community. So he will take the districting commission's feedback and apply it to options that we'll see in June. And in that June packet will be community feedback that you guys can use to enrich your discussion around creating districts. There's a couple reasons why we're more strongly recommending public comment now than we have before. One is we don't know what's going to happen moving forward with COVID-19 and if we're going to be able to have in-person meetings or not. And after talking to our legal representatives and Mr. Fairfax, we thought that if we start collecting public feedback now, that would probably be better because we don't know how much participation we're going to get in July. So opening that up now might be helpful. And also, now that we actually have maps that we're looking at, community feedback could enrich our discussion. Of course, we'd have to have, you guys would have to have conversations around if we had only 30 people wrote in from only Evergreen. You guys would have to talk about what that means. So hopefully we can get some diverse feedback from across the city, but I'd like to open it up now for conversation and I'll let Simone lead that. And you guys can decide what you'd like to do, if we need another meeting this month, and how to move forward with public comment.
This is Simone. I think I'm inclined to say we have another meeting this month. And I think for public comment, I would love if we could figure out a way to, whether it's some sort of an online form where we can have certain questions that we ask, some of which that are yes or no, and then some that are more open-ended, so that as we're collecting feedback, it'll be easier to compare the feedback across the board. And I don't know exactly what those questions would look like, but that's kind of where my thought process is right now. I'll go down our list and give everyone a chance to give feedback on if we should have another meeting this month and what they think public comment might look like. So Mary's not on the line. Chris Gray?
Mary is on the line. She joined about 10 minutes in, so.
Oh, sorry. Mary, we'll start with you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. Can you elaborate on what you're looking for? Is it about the additional meeting?
Both. So if you think we should have an additional meeting this month, and also any thoughts you have on how we should do community input.
I think we should try to have as much community input as possible. If that requires us having an additional meeting to just even review that community input, I think it would be a positive thing. Otherwise, I don't see the need for an additional meeting other than to maybe help with that community input. If you need assistance with like question ideas, I think you should definitely have like preferences between, which map and why do you like it, and and why maybe not. So people could answer, well, because the neighborhoods are together, or because I don't think downtown should be combined with this neighborhood, or, so people can give open-ended answers. I still think that's important because we may not be able to anticipate some of their answers.
What I had originally envisioned was what I will be sending out to all of you that I was going to duplicate for the community was, it's essentially write out your pros and cons for each of the proposed maps, of why you like and don't like it. And then Tony can really take that into consideration. Sometimes it's difficult to evaluate opinions and things like that if it's a simple yes or no answer. But I hear Simone in saying that that might create some ease in comparing data across the board. So do we want to compare data or do we want open-ended? Simone, keep going.
Sorry, I think maybe it wasn't clear. I would ideally want some questions that are yes or no, because I think the data we could collect would be really useful and it would be easy to compare, but definitely some open-ended because it is important to know people's why. Next, Chris.
I would say that I would like some time to digest all of this information a little bit more. Personally, I'm pretty analytical. It really would help me to have the precinct information. I guess we can kind of approach it more like a shapes conversation than getting into that level of detail for now. But I would be fine with at least scheduling another meeting as a follow-up. And if we decide that we just don't have any questions and we can get that feedback to Tony. Without that, we can certainly cancel it. Um, the public comment thing, I feel like I should be saying, yes, I want public input. But I think since day one, we've said that the community forums were the mechanism for that. And we keep kind of revisiting that. And so I feel like at this point, it's a little early from my perspective. If there were a way to get some kind of general information from people's, input as to, what types of things we might consider, I feel like it's still a little bit early to be putting maps out there, though. So.
Thank you, Chris. Jim Langus.
I don't know that I have. The thing that is missing is dialogue between the commissioners. The last couple of meetings we've had, we haven't had an opportunity to visit with one another and ask questions and respond to questions. And I'd sure welcome an opportunity to have that kind of a discussion with the commissioners on whatever the subject might be. I brought up one this evening about the percentage of the deviation percentages, and I'd like to talk about it. If we were a city of 250,000 or 500,000, and we were looking at 50,000 person districts or 100,000 person districts, that's different than a district of that we have our size. When you take a turnout of whatever percentage you want, and it really matters that you have that's just one subject. But I thought Chris raised a good point in terms of looking at the precincts and how they impact the way that Mr. Fairfax has established all of these different plans and their variations. And I just missed that kind of dialogue, looking across and trying to see what everyone is agreeing with or disagreeing with, or what their point of view is. We don't seem to have that.
Thank you, Jim. That's really good feedback. Ethel?
Yes, I agree with Jim and I agree with Chris. I think we need another meeting. I think we need to look at these maps that we have here. There's a lot of information here, a lot of different things going on. And I think before we bring the community in, I think when you're going to build a house, you've got to have a solid foundation. I don't think our foundation as a commissioners group is solid yet, because I think we have a lot of questions about what we're seeing here. You can't present something to someone when we're not sure of it ourselves. I think we need to be on common ground in how we agree with the maps that we're looking at. There's a lot of data to absorb here. I agree with getting stuff about the precincts and things like that, because we want to go out there to them as professional as we can present it. We don't want to go out expecting a fight and a brouhaha going on here. We want this thing to be where they can say, hey, this looks good. We have to be together. And I think it's important that we have another meeting, look at all these maps like for the rest of this week, absorb all this stuff, because there's a lot of data here to look at. And we need to make sure we know exactly what we're doing before we take it to anyone else. So I'm in favor of another meeting and getting more information about the precincts and going from there. And I agree with Jim, you know, not sitting down as a group, commissioners, and pulling things through and looking at things and viewing each other's opinion. That's been a little hard with the situation we're in right now. And it's even more vital that we take our time and look at this stuff and thoroughly go through it.
Thank you, Ethel. John?
Yeah, Ethel is spot on. You know, we have absolutely got to be convinced ourselves that we have a slam dunk plan. And I think Tony presented some really, really good stuff today. And you know, as you go through 1A and 2 and on into the last one, you know, we need to be able to have some time to study it, to look at this precinct data, to have a conversation about the difference between population and voters, and then be in a position to go out and begin these more broader outreach. I'd be real uneasy to have a conversation with the community today or next Monday, because we just don't have our stuff together yet.
Okay, Kari?
Hi, this is Kari. I agree. When I look at the map as presented, I can see the roads and I can kind of imagine what the landscape looks like. And it would be interesting for me to put that into perspective, where Forest Park is, where Evergreen Way is, Everett Mall Way, all these places. So along with the precincts, I think that visual map of looking, as Tony said, at it would be very nice. So I think to agree with most of the commissioners who have spoken, to have another meeting where we can really dive in and discuss would be excellent. To the second point about public comments, yes, I think that's great, but perhaps we get, as others have said, our stuff together and be in the know about what we're talking about in May, and then in June present that idea of we'd love to also hear from you. But I think somewhere between either this week or next week, or in that 2-week period going into June, we could also do those written comments for Tony's benefit. But with us having a discussion next week, that may firm up our own thoughts about what we think about these lines and where they are and what's included, what's not included. So I would agree with another meeting this month, and then I would agree with public comment, but waiting until June until we've had one more meeting to discuss and decide what that plan looks like. Thanks.
Thank you. Ben?
Let me unmute. Okay. I agree with Kari. There's nothing I can add to that. That's my comment.
Okay, Julius?
Yeah, I think we could wait. I agree with Kari and Ben. We could wait another month before we start doing the public comments. And yes, on the meeting, on the additional meeting for this month. And like I said, we wait additional month before we start sending out the letters or the questionnaires to the public to see, yes or no, so that everybody, all the rest of the commissioners or all the commissioners are more, we all have our heads wrapped around the maps and what our purpose is and things like that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Already said sounds like the majority.
I also have, but mind you, we don't know, like Weber said, where the coronavirus is going to take the country or the world, and to where we may not be able to even, have the option to wait another month, or we may have to wait, longer and things like that to get public comments. So I just want to, remind you guys on that.
Thank you. That is a good reminder. Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
So I went through, and are we missing anyone? That was everyone, right?
Yep.
So I went through and documented everyone's responses, and it sounds like yes to another meeting this month and no to public comment, at least for this month, is the majority. So if someone heard a different majority, we can go through a vote. But if it's okay with you, I think you guys could just make a motion to have another meeting this month and hold off on public comment for now. And that would be good unless you guys feel we should do it differently.
I'd move to hold a second meeting for this month on May 11th at 6 p.m. Same time, same place. Unless someone has they know that they have a scheduling conflict. Otherwise, I'll go around and take everyone's votes.
This is John. I do have a scheduling conflict, and I also wonder if 1 week is an adequate amount of time for us to really delve into the data.
Okay, we can look at.
I think you should just open the floor to that conversation. So does anyone else feel like they need more than a week's time? If so, then we could look at, the 18th.
2 weeks.
So this has been, I would, I don't know when Tony was planning on giving us the precinct data. I would like to have that data combined so that when we have this next group meeting just amongst ourselves, we would have enough to go on to where we would move us more, because I do, while the public comment, I think that the public comment needs to be sent out in June, but if we wouldn't, the written piece of it would be going out in June, but we would take it up in July, where the public could come in and have conversation. And that would give us a month and a half. And just as John was just suggesting, if I don't know how long it's going to take, I guess I don't know how long it's going to take for Tony to give us the data about the precincts, because that seems right now where everyone, I see the lines, we all see the lines, but we don't really know how that is going to be impacted once you put the precincts and the normal landmarks that folks would see.
Tony, you want to speak to that fairly quickly?
Tony, you are muted.
Thank you very much. I'm just talking up a storm. Does everyone see my screen that shows the Maptitude system?
Everyone does, except for those who may have called in.
Right. Okay. And so these blue lines, if you can see, are the precincts. And so when we talk about providing the precincts, this is the reason why I say we move a strategy from more generalized to a more detailed. To start off at this level of knowing the precincts is not a good thing. But now I think we're almost there. But what I propose is that we pick certain configurations, and then we can go in and zoom down, for example, and look at Plan A1, because we think Plan A1 is in the general vicinity. And then we can look at each of these blue lines represents the voting tabulation districts or the precincts. They seem to align, and begin to look at each of these, whether we should add those or subtract those. But we should do that in the concept of having the generalized plan, having selected the generalized plan to look at, not from having no plans at all. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Meaning we should have a starting point. And the starting point is, okay, Plan A2, we like Plan A2, we like Plan A3, kind of don't like Plan B1, but let's look at Plan A2 and see how we can change and modify that. And so that's what I mean by moving from generalized to detail, meaning first, I think what we need to do is decide what are the general plans that we like. Then we can move down to a more detail and begin to modify, versus just starting from scratch and trying to develop a plan just with precincts. I hope everyone understands what I'm saying.
This is John. Just as John, I absolutely understand because I couldn't imagine looking at the precinct data for every single option that you've shown us. And so we do kind of need to at least come to some kind of consensus agreement on whether it's A1 or A2 or B1 or whatever. And then that's the one that I would propose that we do the drill down on, whether it's next week or 2 weeks out.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be one. It could be multiple. Ideally would be one, but it could be two different ones that we want to take a look at to begin to massage. And where we start may be completely different from where we end up too, depending upon how we go. But we need to start with something as sort of a baseline or a couple with a baseline.
Okay, so it sounds like we need our next meeting to nail down which hypothetically two plans Tony should move forward with providing that precinct data for. So I'd like to move back to Simone's motion of having a meeting on May 11th. I heard that did not work for John. So I'm wondering if anyone else feels like they need more than 1 week time to review what's already been given to you. If so, we could look at the 18th, but that's a very quick turnaround for Tony to provide precinct. Is that quick, Tony? A week? 2 weeks to get us ready for June 1st? Is that too quick?
It all depends on the feedback. You know, if it last time I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say as soon as we have the second meeting, I'll send you guys the form to fill out, and I can turn that around. You know, same day. I can send that out to you the morning of the 11th, and you could type in it while we're meeting or whatever. But he's gonna have to digest that information and then improve the maps. And then if we do narrow it down to two, we'll then need to go over precinct data at the next meeting as well. So what if we did like the 13th? What about Wednesday, like the May 13th?
Could it be earlier Monday?
I can do any time. So my schedule is open for whatever you guys want to do as long as it doesn't conflict with city council, which would be Wednesdays at 12:30.
Well, if it has to be Monday, I'll find a way to adjust to make it for 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock.
Could we, if we did propose 3 o'clock, John, would that help you, or
Well,
is
no,
6
it's
o'clock?
3 o'clock. It's 3 hours time difference. Is my problem.
That makes sense.
So,
what if it was at 7 o'clock our time and 4 o'clock your time?
no, I appreciate you trying to accommodate me, but let's just keep it at 6 o'clock every time, and I'll figure something out.
All right. So Simone, do you want to call down the list and see if everyone votes, how everyone votes on the May 11th at 6 p.m.?
Yeah. So Mary Fossey,
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Chris Correa,
Chris, you're muted if you're voting.
Sorry about that. Yes, that time works for me. Thanks.
Jim Langus,
Yes.
Ethel McNeil,
Yes.
John Monroe,
Yes.
Kari Quas,
Yes.
Simone Tarver, yes. Ben Young,
Yes.
Julius Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And I think, Tony, can you clarify what kind of feedback on the maps, on the proposed plans, would be most helpful? Because I know we're not talking about looking at precinct level data yet, but I think the way I'm seeing it is that we really need to use our knowledge as people from Everett that are part of these communities to look at the maps and see what makes the most sense, what neighborhoods should or shouldn't be split, that type of information, more of our anecdotal knowledge versus looking straight at the data. Is that kind of more what you're looking for at this point?
Absolutely, that's exactly it. Your experience, and bring that to the map, to changing and altering the map. Now that we've set up another meeting, um, I guess the question is, should I come up with a completely different plan, or should we begin to integrate um, that at the meeting potentially? And I guess the answer lies with what we get as an input, meaning that if we get suggestions that are all in a common sort of venue, that then I can come up with a plan, or maybe even two. If we have, end up with 20 different options, uh, that may not be beneficial to come with 20 different plans. We'll have to figure out how to weed through those and pull from it maybe at that particular meeting, if you can follow what I'm saying. So I'll have to look through what the comments are and see if we can integrate it into some common theme. If it's not a common theme, then at the meeting, that's what we would end up doing, is somehow generalizing those comments.
Okay.
So I will put together the form. I will schedule a meeting for the 11th. And on the 11th, we will discuss deviation, as Jim brought up. And it will be a more conversational meeting between the commissioners. So maybe if we have cameras at home, you guys could turn those on and maybe have a bit more of an in-person meeting. I put air quotes around that. That might help. And then we will take another look at and answer questions on the 11th. So does anyone else have anything to add or share before we close out?
I want to say something. This is Ethel. What I did was, I've got printouts of everything that you sent us, Nicole. And so today I spent a lot of time just spreading everything out on the floor and just going through and looking at all these different maps and doing the comparisons of what I could agree with or what I could not agree with. I don't know if anyone else has printed out. It's a lot of data, over 50 pages, but it was just helpful to just look at everything and say, good mercy, how do we make sure we come to a consensus about this thing before presenting it to the public? There's a lot of data to absorb, and just looking at it and saying, hey, yay and nay for myself was really good for me today.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that it was a lot of information, and I think next week you guys will have had more time to evaluate it after explanation and be able to provide even, more rich conversation. So I think that that's great. Simone?
Yeah, I think I don't really have anything else to add. Yeah. I think if no one else has anything to add, I move to adjourn if we're all done.
Second.
Great.
Alrighty. All in favor?
Aye.
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 If anyone's not in favor, it's too bad.
See you on the 11th.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night. Have a
Good
good
night,
evening.
Mel.
Stay safe.
Take care.